Welcome here in Brussels. First of all, I would like to welcome, of course, Inge Temelkuran. Inge, it's so nice to have you with us here.
Oh, thank you for having me, and thank you for coming as well.
I suppose all those people present here, that they know Inge Temelkuran. How should I describe you? A journalist, a writer, a voice, an important voice.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, a female voice. From Turkey, living in Zagreb at the moment. Inge, we're going to talk about your book, but we're also going to talk, of course, about Turkey, which is so important at this moment, not only in the Islam world, but in the whole world. Let me start with what happened this week, when we heard President Erdogan say those threats towards Europeans. Europeans won't be safe on the streets anymore. How did you understand that speech?
First of all, it is so nice to know. Do you hear my voice at the back? Maybe? Yeah, all right. It is wonderful to see that Turkey has become so popular. So we are, playing box, full house. So it is nice to know. And secondly, this has become an interesting topic for me. Whenever you talk about Turkey, you automatically talk about Erdogan. Nowadays, I'm writing for several media outlets, and whatever I write about Turkey, they put Erdogan's picture near to my article, even though I don't talk about him sometimes. Well, it is not easy not to talk about him, but yeah. So I am becoming a mirror image, not a mirror image, we're becoming a duo with him, like on international level. This is, there's a joke side of it, there's a funny side of it, but there is the other question of, is Turkey all about Erdogan,
Mm-hmm.
or Erdogan, should Erdogan be the only face that we know from Turkey? And there are many consequences to this, putting face of Erdogan on Turkey. Therefore, coming to your question, it was embarrassing for many people in Turkey to hear those threats against Europe. And it was ruthless and, relentless, those threats. And there are many people in Turkey who knows the gravity of the situation, who knows that this is an extremely embarrassing thing, a mortifying incident even.
But is it only embarrassing, or can it be dangerous?
As well. I mean, like, not only dangerous in short term, but in long term too. Because Turkey, whatever you think of Turkey, I don't know, but Turkey has been established on the idea of being a Western country, or moving towards Western civilization. Therefore, these threats and the incidents surrounding these threats have been cutting the historic ties of Turkish Republic to the Western civilization.
Mm-hmm.
This has been going on in Turkey for more than a decade now. And it was made very clear by this government since from the very beginning that their goal of civilization was not on the Western side, but on the Eastern side. And there is a funny thing, not a funny tragic thing going on in Turkey. For the first time this year in our history, we are using the Arab time, not the European Central European Central Time Zone.
Yes.
So people did not only have to go to work when it's dark, and they were really depressed about it, but it was also a symbolic
Mindset.
departure from the Western world, like breaking up with Western world, burning the bridges with Western world. It's it seems like a small thing, but then it actually is not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's what you see what's happening now, because the divisions between Turkey and European countries, are growing worse. I read some articles you wrote after these tensions, for example, with the Netherlands, after they did not allow Turkish ministers to have campaign. You weren't so pleased about the Dutch reaction as well.
Yeah, I wrote a piece about this in Guardian, and I was actually criticizing the Turkish side more. And then I thought, okay, this is not only about Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
There's something else happening in Netherlands as well. Not only in Netherlands, but in entire Europe. Actually, I think Europe, several countries in Europe, will be witnessing, experiencing similar things that we did in Turkey. That's why I wrote the book, Turkey, the Insane and Melancholy. And this is why I wrote the book, telling the story to the foreign audience. The book is not published in Turkish, but in several other languages. Because I wanted to tell everybody, especially in Western world, not only Europeans but also Americans as well, that be careful, these Trojan horses are coming towards you. And all over these Trojan horses, it's written real democracy, real people bringing democracy to your country. So I see the Trojan horses coming towards you, be careful, and this is the narrative that they are going to be using, and I see some, signs of this narrative appearing in European countries, and one of them being Netherlands.
But it could be Germany, France, Belgium.
As well, of course. Yeah. France, Austria, and England as well. So yeah, I think they need to hear this story, even though they are not aware that they need it now.
So actually, you're saying people look well at what's happening in Turkey because Europe can learn from it?
Yeah, well, right now when you look at Turkey, it seems like a crazy country where anything can happen. So I would understand a European citizen feeling like, I cannot associate myself with this country. I'm like, I cannot associate my country with this crazy country where anything can happen. But it wasn't a crazy country. Like 10 years ago, it was a relatively normal country. And then all of a sudden, this play of narrative on political and societal level messed up the country, and we ended up in this situation. And I'm seeing the symptoms of the same narrative in Europe, in European politics as well. Some people thought that Netherlands election was a triumph against Wilders.
Geert
Wilders.
Yes.
I cannot pronounce his name.
But he did gain votes and he did gain seats.
Not only that, he invaded the political space with his narrative, and he pulled the center towards himself. So this is a triumph for him, not only for him, but all the rising populist leaders. And I don't know if you noticed, but they are over and over again repeating that they are a global movement, not only in Europe but also in United States.
Yes.
And it's coming from Russia to passing Europe and to United States. And even though they are not really on purpose being global, they like to say this, and they are very enthusiastic, giving pictures together, taking selfies together, especially with Farage and Trump. We could see that. We can say that, see this happening. So I think all these countries have to, intellectuals of these countries, or anybody who is capable of critical thinking, should come together on international level to come up with an answer to this rising populism, because sooner than you think, I guess, all these countries will be invaded, contaminated by this discourse of rising populism.
Yes, but how do you do that?
Great question, and I have a great answer for this.
Fantastic.
Because it's not an answer. I love these answers, which are not answers. This is a global question, and actually I'm serious. This is a global question. Therefore, there is no way to come with individual answers. So we have to come together, find a collective answer to this narrative. I think we are the generation all over the globe who will come up with the answer to the question of, is this the end of humanity? Because I'm like, talking about these things in Brussels especially is symbolic to me, because the question of fragility of Europe is coming up. The question of, are we done with whatever they are, so-called Western values, values of Western civilization? Are we done with all those values that we thought of being universal? They are becoming less and less important, whereas the forced ignorance on societies are becoming more and more visible. This is how I see it. It's not only Turkey being a messed up country, but also the entire thought system is coming to pieces in front of our eyes. And it's, I wrote this piece for Guardian, I think last December, which I talked about this. These guys, the leaders of the populist movement, let's say, it is like playing chess talking to them. You think and you behave in the, within the established rules of logic. You play chess with them, but they are pigeons. Even though you play perfectly well, they just fly and they mess up the chessboard, and then at the end they shit on the chessboard and fly away proudly.
So you can't win.
Yeah, within these rules, with our established system, I think we cannot deal with them. There was a interesting symbolic moment in Copenhagen. I was
It's a news exchange.
News exchange.
Yes.
I was in the panel, and Mr. Farage was the key speaker. And he was lying about certain things. And I saw the reactions coming from the audience. The German editor of an important news magazine said, "You are lying, Mr. Farage." And he just laughed. And then a French journalist said, "But how can you say that?" She was paralyzed by by this ruthless lying. And then the American journalist said, "But we have to fact check, we have to do the fact checking." But everybody, almost everyone there, got paralyzed because this guy is lying ruthlessly and they don't know what to do, because Western civilization stands upon the value that we shouldn't be lying to each other. This is not correct. But when there is a person who says that I am lying, and this is called post-truth now, this is my truth, what are you going to do with this? How will you prove that your truth is more valid than his? So, yeah, all these things I'm talking about is about post-truth, this global situation of rising populism and so on and so forth. Therefore, actually, Turkey is an important case that we have to look closer.
When you look, it goes for Turkey, I think, and it goes for European countries as well. I think what we have to understand is, why do people like this leader, this politics, this party? For a lot of people here in the West and in the room, I think as well, it's really hard to understand, why do people vote for AKP? Why do they vote for a man like President Erdogan? But they have their reasons. Do you understand why they vote for him? Why they think that party, that person is good for the country, for the stability, for the economics?
I think every country has its own unique, specific reasons for this question, to answer this question. But then overall, I think it's a philosophical and economic crisis that is triggering all this incredible, very fast development in front of our eyes. I think it's one, we are facing the biggest crisis, most probably the last crisis of capitalism, and secondly, we are facing the crisis of identity politics, which enables these people to tell lies and rename these lies as their own truth. So when you are immersed in identity politics, then you sort of acknowledge that truth is liquid and anybody can believe in anything, because that's an identity issue, and you cannot say anything about it because you have to respect the other identity, and so on and so forth. So I think Western thinking has been putting itself in a very dangerous cul-de-sac by this identity politics, and this is why you cannot do a lot with identity politics about the rising populism, because they would say, I believe in this. So you have to respect the belief. You cannot challenge the belief. Therefore, it becomes like your system of thinking becomes paralyzed. Am I being too
No, but no, I do understand, because it's a politics of philosophy in a way. And when you look at Turkey, like 20, 30 years ago, Turkey was a very unstable country. You know, government came and it fell, and another government came and it fell, and it wasn't good for the economics. And then AKP came, and there was stability. And the roads became better in the whole of the country, and healthcare became better. And I'm just wondering, for a lot of people, especially people who have difficulty every month to meet ends every month again, they say, you know, the roads are good, the hospital is good, there's a doctor for me. I don't care about freedom of speech or this or that kind of democracy, because it's too, you know, an idea, and they like practical things, and that's what they vote for. Could that be the difference?
Two answers. One, this roads, healthcare thing has, I mean, I don't like this cliche attitude of drawing similarities between Second World War, Germany and Turkey. But, you know, actually I saw the German posters of roads from the Nazi era. So this roads thing is a tricky situation in healthcare. But then, yes, we have to think about this. Do human beings really need freedom of thought as much as we think they do? Mm-hmm. This is a tricky thing. And stability is another problem, because although we like to name this new development as rising populism, there are people who is naming it as orderism. Well, this is a philosophical question, but you know, if Zygmunt Bauman was right about the liquidity of modernity, it might be nice for us, you know, nice for us as in cosmopolitan people and so on. But people need to, some people need order, conservatism, you know, they want something solid. And they are not very comfortable with this fluid reality, fluid modernity.
Certitudes. You know, you can be sure that this and that
they
is
want
happening.
Security.
Yes.
And this is, you know, it is as well a personal choice. You know, it's a ethical choice that we do in our personal lives as well. Sometimes we sacrifice our security in order to be more alive, to live a fuller life. And sometimes we think that we are too scared to, or it's too fearful to live a full life, therefore we retreat back to security. So maybe masses do the same thing. Mm-hmm. This is too much for me, this is too much unknown, this is too much bleakness, too much vague to me, and then I want to go back to that great United States, or you know, that great Britain, or great Turkey. And there's a funny trick there as well. All these countries, all these rising populist leaders are rewriting history in a very funny way. And even though, you know, everybody knows that it is not true, they are so limitless when it comes to yes, there was a great America, there was a great Britain, that we are now going back there. People want to believe this. The reason I am being so fast, and I'm telling too many things at, you know, in so little time, is actually that I want to alert people. It's not only about Turkey, it's about Europe. And although we can criticize idea of Europe, the ideal of Europe, there are things that we need to secure, protect. Therefore, I do think that this is the last standing castle of humanity. And I think it was Lucebert who said, all things of value are fragile. Yeah?
What are the, finish your sentence.
So Europe is a fragile thing, but then it has to be protected, I think. Although we criticize the idea and ideal of Europe, we have to criticize it. Therefore, I'm being like, telling too much in little time, and you know, making it like a long, I don't know how to say, a panoramic. I'm trying to give a panoramic picture about the situation. So I'm like, you know, quick, you know, get yourself together. We have to do something about this.
Let me go back to Turkey. What you said in the beginning was very interesting. When we think of Turkey, when we speak of Turkey, we speak of Erdogan. But Turkey is a lot more, of course.
Exactly.
That can be reassuring or it cannot be.
It is reassuring, and it is touching as well for me personally. I've been talking about this lately, especially women of Turkey. They are struggling like there is no tomorrow. Well, there might not be a tomorrow for, secular Turkish women. So they are really struggling in order to stop what's to come. And their struggle is not as visible as Erdogan. This is something we have to think about, I think. When you start thinking about, asking questions about Erdogan or similar leaders, you become too focused on them. And then you lost the focus, about other things, and they are becoming the central figure of your thinking. First, it's not the men, it's the system and the ideas and the ideological crisis. Second, if you start looking at them too much, you sort of lose your faith in humanity. It's as if they are the entire humanity. It's not like that. We have millions of people who are struggling against this in Turkey. And Europe, and especially United States, is so lucky. You saw it coming. We didn't. The first years of AKP government, the most popular joke was, is some sort of, aliens, are aliens running an experiment on Turkey? You see? It was like, what's happening? Something is happening, but we couldn't really know what was happening. For instance, United States is so lucky. They have an obvious clown there. Trump. It didn't happen like that in Turkey. We had he was the most proper leader, like Putin was. Putin came to power like that. He was bringing real democracy. So I think Europe has to use this chance of foreseeing things.
When you make the comparison between United States and Trump and Turkey and Erdogan, in the United States what we see these days is that you have what we call the checks and balances. The president comes up with an idea, a lot of people say, what the hell? It goes to Congress and it's not going through. How's that in Turkey? Do the checks and balances still work there?
No, of course not. We lost it long time ago. And this is one of the tricky things. We lost it by consent. This is how it happens.
No one reacted.
Not only no one reacted, there were many intellectuals who were legitimizing the process. There was, this is a detail, I'm like, you don't need to know this, but there was a big political case against secular people, Ergenekon, and Europe was dancing around it, Americans was dancing around it, Turkish intellectuals, many Turkish intellectuals were, celebrating it. They were, the government was basically imprisoning the military people. But then it was becoming more and more, they were imprisoning civilians as well. They built a gigantic prison outside Istanbul, which had a courthouse within the prison. But since the old guards of the system, the military guys and so on, since they were the ones who were imprisoned, some intellectuals were thinking, oh, this is good for us. But meanwhile, we lost the idea of justice. We lost the system of law, rule of law. And I was, warning people, if we lose it once, we're not going to get it back. And this is what happened. That case went away, and then another case came, like a big political case, and other sectors of political spectrum was imprisoned. So there was no one else at the end who would say no to what happened. So yeah, there was consent. I mean, this never is mentioned enough, I think. With with systems like these, with regimes like this, it doesn't go like this evil guy comes and then beats the good guy and then he becomes the ruler. No, there is this gray area where there is, concealed consent, and then there's manufactured consent, and then people say yes for other reasons. That whatever happens is happening in that gray area.
Mhm.
This is why I say Europe and United States, they are both lucky because you don't have that gray area. For instance, when Trump came to power, I thought, my God, this is so lucky because all the intellectuals, almost all of them, and the artists and so on, they were so open, saying that we are against this guy. And there were people rejecting the appointments.
Mhm.
This is awesome. So it's clear, like black and white. They don't have the grayish process that we had in Turkey, which confused everyone.
Is Turkey black and white today?
It is, and
And what are the differences? Is it modern versus conservative?
no. Most people and most media outlets thought that this was the polarization in between, seculars and non-seculars,
Yes.
conservatives or modernists and so on. No, the polarization is in between obedient and disobedient. Period. That's the thing. The one, all these disobedient part of Turkey can be nationalist, conservative, radical Islamist even, and secular as well. But the obedience are religiously supporting this political action, political movement, and they are part of it actively. So this is there is a deep and very painful crack in between obedient and disobedient.
What can we learn from history? What's very interesting in your book, The Insane and the Melancholy, is you divide it in 3 parts: yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And in the part of yesterday, you write a lot about the military coup of 1980. And you see a lot of similarities to what happened last summer with the attempted coup in Turkey, with a lot of people being detained, a lot of people disappearing, a lot of people losing their jobs. Could Turkey have learned from earlier coups, or is what's happening right now really different from recent history?
It is different, but anyone who's interested in Turkey from outside Turkey, I'm sure read these pieces which are based upon this dichotomy of seculars and non-seculars, and the army is the guardian of secularism, whereas actually the real people of Turkey are Muslims and so on. This was a big lie that established international media kept on repeating, and that legitimized the fact of AKP coming to power, because it was as if they are finally ending the rule of military and real people are coming to power. It wasn't like that. The reason I tell about 1980 coup is because after 1980 coup, military brought obligatory religion lessons to schools, and actively and openly the military supported the radical Islamist movements, including Fethullah Gülen movement.
Yes.
So that dichotomy, forget about it. What happened in Turkey is actually because of 1980 coup. Because this generation of people, which Erdogan is a member of, was produced, manufactured, almost forcefully fabricated by 1980 coup.
Do you think this coup attempt of last summer, was it by Gülen movement? Because we still don't know the answer.
We won't know the answer. 1980 coup was in cooperation with CIA.
Mm-hmm.
And we finally definitely knew about it after 20 years of 1980 coup. We heard by then the chief of Turkey for CIA telling by then the president of the United States saying, our boys did it. We heard the telephone recording. Therefore, we knew that CIA is included. Until then, everybody sort of knew it, but nobody could prove it. So I think it is not easy to know these things until some time passes.
It's too early.
It is too early.
But what happened between...
But I must emphasize that Fethullah Gülen movement is an incredibly powerful movement, not only in Turkey, but in all over the globe. And one of the reasons I criticize them from the very beginning of my career is that they are not transparent in their transactions.
Mm-hmm. What happened between AKP and Gülen? Because only a few years ago they were still...
them that.
But they were good friends, you know.
Yeah,
was it the power struggle that started back then already?
Most probably, but what I'm interested is, like, Turkey was established as a project, a secular, sovereign, and westernized country in a very, very difficult geography. And until 1980, you know, it was relatively, you know, the governments, the political route followed this idea, followed this ideological ideal. But then after 1980, it became something else, and Turkey, it was in such a geography that it would have been impossible for it to be like out of Cold War era. What happened to Turkey is actually because of what happened during the Cold War era. I mean, like when you have neighbors like Iraq, Iran, Syria, you know, Soviet Union, you know, and when you are the last country on the eastern side of the map with a NATO base, I'm like, you cannot operate very freely, I would say. So Fethullah Gülen, Erdogan, all these names are not that important. Actually, the important thing is how the big project of Turkish Republic operates now. And it's obviously operates different than we thought it could.
And constantly looking for new allies.
Yeah.
It's moving from the east to Europe, now to Russia, maybe back to the east.
The funny part is, you know, this ally changing is happening so rapidly. So therefore, the followers of the regime, the government, are really confused, because one day we hate Russia, and then, you know, on Friday we decided that we love Russia. So sometimes they have to, you know, protest certain countries. So they don't know which consulate to go and which flag to burn. No, seriously, this is happening. They burned French flag instead of Dutch flag, and they were tweeting Mr. Holland because his surname was Holland during the Dutch flag.
I thought Mr. Hollande was the president of Holland.
Yeah, and somebody wrote to him in English, Mr. Holland, don't be scared, because you know they'll be tweeting at you. Don't get scared. It's just they think that you are, you know, Holland because you're Holland. It's funny stuff, yeah. It's the funny part is funny.
It's not about the system,
but then all these people are becoming role models in society. All this ignorance, mortifying ignorance, is becoming the ideal figure. After the coup is important, the attempt coup is important, what happened after that is important as well. But there was this one moment that actually told about everything that we are going through. There was a symbolic funeral for the martyrs of the, you know, military coup, after 15th of July 2015, 16, yeah. And the imam, the clergyman, religious leader, was praying for them, and he said out loud, "May the God protect us from the evils of educated people." So this is the symbolic thing that we are going through. See?
It's a thing you hear sometimes in Turkey when you talk to people, that they say that AKP voters are less educated than, for example, HDP voters. Is that true?
I don't know the figures, or I cannot make a prediction about that, assumption about that. But what we see on the social stage is not a very educated profile, I would say.
You said Turkey started as a secular project. What's left of that secularism?
We'll see that after 16th of April referendum.
What will come out of this referendum? It will be tight, yes or no? More power to the president or not? I asked you before, will it be yes or no?
Yeah.
Your answer was?
That was off the stage, now on the stage. No, it's the same answer. But I have friends from international media outlets, and the question is, what's going to happen on 16th of... And of course they had to tell back to Washington or, their bureau in Paris, in London. They have to write an article about this. And they actually know very well that nobody could tell what's going to happen. There are a lot of options. There are people saying that it's going to be cancelled, the referendum, the entire thing. There are ones who say that there will be a military rule, so there won't be any referendum. There are ones who say that it will be no, and then therefore there will be a civil war. There are ones who say that it will be yes, and then there will be a civil war. The country, there is a term in politics, in political science, that ungovernable country. I'm so afraid that Turkey can become that, ungovernable. Because I do think that it's not out of nationalist sentiments or anything, but I do think that my country deserves better, far better than this. Because people are so tired. It's like, imagine every day, all day, for years, you are bombarded with, imagine Trump in your life for 15 years. And little clones of Trump as well. Sometimes with better hair, that's it.
When we met, I think 5 years ago in Istanbul, it was before the first presidential election, well, the first time that Erdogan was elected president, and one of the ministers in the AKP government said that women shouldn't be laughing publicly. And you started a Twitter campaign. It was her that started the Twitter campaign. And asking everyone everywhere to post laughing selfies on the internet. I think it's about 5 years ago. Do you feel, you're not living in Turkey anymore right now, but you know the country. Do you think that life for women has changed over those, let's say, 5 years?
Extremely. Not in a good way, though, of course, obviously. One of the phenomena that was so interesting to me in recent years. Okay, I am living among middle class, upper middle class, educated people, and all the men in our circle are like, let's wait and see. You know how men are. Like, they just wait and see. And all women were extremely alert, and they are still alert. And I think it's not only because they have better antennas, but also because
they feel it.
They see it coming towards them. Because men, at the end of the day, if things go really, really horrible, they can just grow a beard and say, Selamun alaikum. But women cannot do that. Because we are so obvious. We cannot be changing our lives. We cannot compromise to the status quo that is about to come to Turkey. That's why women are so struggling so with a bigger effort, I think, and they're fighting for their lives.
And you saw it in March 8th, International Women's Day. There were a few hundred women here in Brussels asking for attention for International Women's Day. In Istanbul, there were like thousands. It was so big manifestation.
It gives me creeps, yeah. I'm having goosebumps when I think about it. It is because they really mean it. It's like
they know
when the need is that fatal, it becomes a life and death or death matter. So you are on the street and protesting. It's not only 8th of March, but in different demonstrations. When I see women, I can see their urgency, the urgency in their faces.
The number of femicide has grown a lot. Does that have to do with politics?
I'm sorry?
Does that have to do with politics? Is it because
Of course it is. I mean, like when you change the role model of the society from educated, secular, middle-class men to nouveau riche, conservative, male Sunni figure, that changes a lot for women. And the marriages with children, and there are members of the government who married to their wives when their wives were like 14, 15, whatever. So it's obvious that they're coming from a different lifestyle, so they are promoting it, not only promoting like vocally, but they are being like that. And the Erdogan has been telling everyone like 3 kids, I want 3 kids, and lately he revised it, I think, to 4 kids for Turkish people living in
Europe.
Yeah.
Yes, to have a lot of
5.
children.
5.
Well, good luck.
You're not living in Turkey anymore. Is it because of the climate? Is it because you don't feel welcome anymore, or
Well,
are under pressure?
I wouldn't put it as I'm not living in Turkey anymore. This is not the only time that I am leaving Turkey to work. I've been in Tunisia to write Women Who Blow on Knots, which appeared in French with À quoi bon la révolution si ne je peux danser? And in German with another title I cannot tell now. And I was in Beirut to write Banana Sounds for a year,
Yes.
and then in Oxford for Deep Mountain. So this is like one of those.
A period.
Yes, I would like to think that way. Otherwise, it's emotionally unbearable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Does that make a difference that you're a woman? Because life for women is maybe harder in Turkey right now.
For women, yeah, exactly. But you know, I was a well-known columnist. Let's put it like that. I was the most read woman columnist 2 years in a row before I lost my job. But then, when I'm looking back now, I think I was representing all the things that they don't want to see in a woman. Like, I don't have a child, I'm not married, I'm leftist, I'm laughing, and I'm not obedient. And I have this bad habit of saying what I think.
Do you get threats?
Not anymore. But that threats was my daily life, like a few years ago. But it's not only me. I mean, many people got it.
Of course.
Yeah, it's something that you joke about in Turkey, because you have to joke about it, otherwise you could go crazy. That's why. But yeah, not anymore. I'm becoming insignificant for them because I'm writing novels.
Well, they haven't read this book then. There's one part in this book
Well,
that...
they did. There was a television program about it.
Ah,
Of
good.
course. It was just before I left for Zagreb. It was saying, you know, okay, I won't use the word, but I slept with people to make my way up, and I am PKK lover, and then I am liar, and I'm overrated, and I love this because Meryl Streep got that as well, that one as well. Overrated, and they love this overrated. They say it 5 times, in case not everybody, for everybody to understand. So it was a 20 minutes piece about this book saying that God knows what kinds of lies she's telling to foreigners about us. And this is her face, by the way, if you run into her on the street.
You said, like Nigel Farage, so what?
So what? Yeah.
There's one part in the book that really struck me. It's in the part with the yesterday part, and I was just wondering, is this really about yesterday? So I'm going to ask you the question now. Is this part about yesterday? It's where you say, let me take a look, here. When you write about fascism and the dark side of fascism, you write, fascism isn't when the bad guys suddenly materialize and kick the living daylights out of the good guys. Fascism is the gradual loss of humanity. The progression is so slow and slight as to be invisible to the naked eye. Is this about
This bit
yesterday?
actually was from the preface, from the prologue of a book that I wrote after I lost my job. It was a collection of articles, my latest articles in 2012. Before I wrote before I losing my job, and this was my words about getting fired and about what Turkey is going through. So yeah, I think fascism is this, and it's not about yesterday; it's about today. And it is a process, a very slow process, most of the time not very visible to the naked eye. You have to stop the process and watch it very carefully. And sometimes you have to take a step back to see the patterns, you know, how it's happening today and how it was happening before in history. I don't want to give the German experience because it is too obvious. Every country lived it in a different way. You know, Belgium most probably lived it in a different way then, or you know, Netherlands and so on and so forth. But this is a bleak, vague process that includes consent. That consent is the password to understand who is producing consent, why they are consenting this, and how this consent works in the development of fascism. This is the most important thing, because if these guys are not legitimized, they cannot do anything. But somehow they become legitimate. And how they become legitimate is about the question of consent.
So it is important not to focus just on one person, but on the system and the people around the system, in the system.
Exactly. This book, Turkey, Insane and Melancholy, I wrote it as if, like, you know, I'm taking you to Turkey and then I'm telling you, oh, look, this is the real story. This is what happened, actually. This is the mood of the book. And I'm telling it just for people to see the same, you know, the similarities in between what's going on in Turkey and in Europe and in the United States.
When you talk about Turkey and Europe, you also have a lot of Turkish people in Europe who will vote also in 2 weeks in the referendum.
Yeah.
Why is it that for Belgium, for example, I think it's 85% of people will probably vote yes for the referendum. It's people who were born here, who were raised here, who never lived in Turkey. Why is their bond to Turkey still so strong?
Erdogan is a brilliant, brilliant politician. And all brilliant politicians have this magical power to identify themselves with the masses. And they can do the wink to them, like, you know, even if they're talking something else, and when they are meaning completely different thing, they could do to their followers, and their followers would think that, oh, we're acting together in this. We're together, like, you know, and I know what he's talking about. And he does this in an amazingly beautiful way, adequate way. So he somehow managed to identify with the masses. And the masses, I think, they think as if, like, now finally there is a guy who talks about us, who makes us visible.
Do you think that the Netherlands and Germany as well did Erdogan a favor by being so difficult about Turkish ministers campaigning in European countries for the referendum? Was it a good or a bad thing?
I was like, the Guardian piece was about how both sides benefit from this. We have a expression in Turkish. It is either fisherman fight or fisherman fight. You know, fishermen have these oars to row
boats. Yes.
Yeah, and when they fight, they fight with those sticks. You know, with those big things. And from a distance, it looks epic. But then, actually, they don't touch each other. It just looks big, but there's nothing happening there. So I think there we were viewers on both sides, both in Turkey and Netherlands. The ones who are watching it thought, oh, this is epic, our guy is winning, and so on. But it's
short-term vision.
Yeah, I think it was a great bargain for either side, because what's the name of the guy?
Wilders?
Wilder,
yes.
Not Wilders, the other guy.
Rutte,
yeah,
the prime minister.
He benefited from it, and Erdogan did, so short day, nice job. Yeah, this is how it goes. And by the way, I do think that Europe is having its own crisis, so its only problem is not Turkey. It has, her plate is full already. So, yeah.
This referendum will be a big day in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
What do you hope for Turkey?
This hope word is, I've been talking about the hope word. I don't believe in hope. I believe in determination, because there are times that hope is so rare and you cannot depend on hope because it's too fragile, especially in times like ours. What do I hope? I hope.
Well, you said Turkey.
Well, I cannot hope. What I wish is, of course, that it becomes, the outcome will be no, and the defeat is accepted in a gentleman-like way, and it will be all over.
Mhm.
So, okay, let's hope this.
Yeah. But you don't believe
Hope,
it.
as much as you can, but it won't happen. Unfortunately, what was the expression? That comes with the sword goes with the sword. So, in these messed up, conflicted, tense situations, you cannot expect some, all of a sudden, magical, peaceful solution to happen. There will be, it won't be easy. That referendum won't be easy.
But maybe it's too hard of a question, but can you predict something for Turkey? Well, where will Turkey be in 5 years? Because a lot of what the result will depend on the reaction of the people. And I do have the feeling that really not all, if you talk about obedient and disobedient, and that being the opposing sides in Turkey, I do have the feeling that more and more people are letting their voice being heard.
Yes.
Will people...
But, okay, this is not only an emotional, on the surface political situation. This is an economic problem. Because AKP and Fethullah Gülen movement as well, they created this enormous economic network. And it goes to the thinnest veins of the society. So if this government falls, many people will lose their jobs, will lose their life, will lose their penny in their pockets. So it's not only a political question. It's a matter of, do these people, would these people sacrifice their income, for instance, their, daily bread? So
for the future of the country.
And I don't want to predict because, Turkey is one of those countries that you cannot predict easily. And predictions are easily mixed with wishes. And I have been suffering from that already. When I make a prediction, and even though I say that I fear this a lot, they would go, Inge Temelkuran said this, Turkey will become da-da-da-da. So, once again, she wishes Turkey to become a horrible place. No. So predictions are dangerous things.
So Inge Temelkuran has no clue what will happen to Turkey.
And I'm proud of it, actually, because nobody would say it out loud, but nobody has a clue. I can assure you that. I mean, nobody, seriously.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Inge Temelkuran.